and welcome everyone to another exciting episode this month. So look, digital transformation is at the forefront of everyone's minds, whether you're an InsurTech or an established insurance company. And today we've got a couple of fantastic guests, MJ from Tower and Chris Ballantyne from Partners Life, who are going to take you through some of the journey that both Tower and Partners Life have been on in terms of digital transformation and how the changing needs of consumers around buying and managing their insurance. So we've got a bit of a presentation first up from Michelle, then we'll move into Chris and then do some Q&A. So we'll have a chat room running. So make sure if you've got something that specifically you'd like to ask, make sure you jump in, get some Q&A going, and we'll make this a fun and interactive session. So handing over to you, MJ.
Thank you, Dale. Hopefully a good session for everybody today. I run Tower's direct-to-consumer business, so just in terms of where I fit in there. And Tower's direct business is about 270 million GWP. We've got kind of a tick over 200,000 customers and 400,000 risks. So, predominantly direct-to-consumer. And digital, and I wanted to share a little bit about how digital and data shows up in our customer experiences. So Caro, I think, is going to be holding the pen on these slides. And I was really pleased to be able to talk about this because actually it's at the heart of our strategy. We are very, very purposeful and active in looking for wicked customer problems that can be solved through digital and data. And predominantly, and for me, coming into insurance 5 years ago, quite surprised at that time around how low an engagement sector we have. And so, the opportunity and the value that digital and data provides us in driving customer engagement is really, is super critical, I think, to all insurers across the board. It's not rocket science. When we've got really positively engaged customers, they buy more, they stay longer, and they advocate for you as a business. So, particularly in our low engagement sector, I think customer engagement is one of those really critical opportunities for us. So rather than kind of talk about theory, though, I thought I would present a couple of recent customer engagement examples or digital and ways that we've used digital and data and how that shows up for our customers. So the first one that Caro will flick to is based on an insight that customers found it really time consuming and a hassle to get a quote. And so some of you may have seen our Got a Minute, Get a Quote campaign that ran a few months ago. Really super successful campaign based on that insight. So we had, luckily from our digital journey, we've had a foundation of the Bundle Builder, which is our digital quote to buy journey. And using that foundation, we were then able to transform that in the last 6 months to use data from places like Cordell, our own EIS platform, to start to remove questions from that quote journey and take some of that hassle out for either one or multiple products. Where we've got to is if you're a new customer with Tower, it takes you 9 questions to get a house quote. If you're an existing customer and you're in an authenticated journey, that's down to 5 questions. And that's pretty spectacular when you think about the darlings of the global industry, the digital darlings, the new ones with Hippo and Lemonade, the best they've got to is the mid-teens. So we've really been able to use that insight and drive a different experience for our customers. The second one, if Kara moves along, the second example where we've been able to use digital and data is, you would have seen in the media probably in the last couple of weeks, actually, Blair was out talking to a lot of analysts, a lot of media about this last change. And, again, don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that natural hazards have been increasing significantly in frequency and severity. And in the last decade, nearly half of those have actually been related to flooding. So we're partnered with RMS and LINZ and NIWA to model the risk of flooding for every address in New Zealand. So that was 5 million data points, over 5 million data points, and I think about 50,000, if I'm right, 50,000 simulations to build that model so that we were able to understand and identify the risk of natural hazards and flooding and earthquake at every single address in New Zealand. So when you put that data and that model together with a great digital experience, so that we can now help customers to understand the risk of natural hazard for their own property, not the guy down the street, not the mesh block, but their specific property. So using digital and data, we've been putting that data into the hands of our customers and being super transparent with them about the risk that they face. And also, and importantly, I think in our industry, is also making sure that we're transparent around how that affects their premiums. So any customer, so anyone who wants to go online after this, go to tau.co.nz, get a quote for your property, find out what your risk profile is. So anyone in New Zealand can do that. Also for our tower customers, particularly those we've got about 130,000 now who are registered on My Tower, can go in there and they can see their risk profile. So really another, very useful use of digital and data for our customers. So the third example, if Kara can move along again, thank you. This one's about a year old now. So a year ago, we launched GoKarma, which is a safe driving app. So we worked with a Croatian InsurTech called Modo to bring a safe driving app to New Zealand. And the app, if you haven't downloaded it, uses connected Bluetooth connectivity to effectively grab the data and rate the ABCs of safe driving. So acceleration, braking, cornering, and then obviously speeding and phone usage. And it takes all of that data and presents to the customer an overall score, as well as an individual score for that trip, and really gives very, very valuable real-time feedback to users on their driving behaviour. We've now got around 10.5 million driving kilometres, or driving behaviour from 10.5 million kilometres. And we're able to now provide customers with an enormously rich data set for how they actually behave on the road. They can also participate in leadership, kind of league ladders and leaderboard challenges. They can get in-app rewards, download badges, have individual competitions with family and friends. And I think we've got a year's worth of data now. We're doing some analysis on that. So I can't talk to you quite yet about what's come out of that analysis, but just a small sneak into it. So GoKarma drivers have a lower loss ratio than non-GoKarma drivers. So that's a very excellent big tick in the box for an insurer. Older people have a better score. 3 p.m. is an absolutely terrible time to be on the road in terms of driving behaviour. And while it absolutely pains me to say it, men have a slightly higher score than women in our GoKarma experience. So these are just 3 examples that I've shared. Kara, if you want to go to the next slide, that really kind of try to demonstrate, I guess, what we're trying to do from a tower perspective to bring digital and data to life in really valuable ways for our customers. We've got, obviously, it's, as I said at the beginning, this is absolutely core to our strategy, around customer experience, customer engagement, and in fact, our entire growth strategy in the direct side of our business. So, we've now got 1.7 billion data points and growing from 25 partners. So there is more on the way. Watch this space, but I think that will do that for now.
What you're going to hear from me is a little bit about Partners Life's digital strategy in the life insurance sector. And our digital strategy is, like MJ described for Towers, very much focused on customer experience, but on a different pain point. So if you could trigger the next slide, please. The life insurance market is probably, in realistic estimates, 10 to 20 years behind in terms of use of data and technology for most consumer-facing industries which revolve around sales. And the elephant in the room when it comes to technological enablement and engagement of customers is that the majority of distribution in the life space is still intermediated. Human advisors meeting clients face-to-face, making sales. That has pluses and minuses, but that's more than 90% of the system today. So our strategy to date has been that we know there are a significant number of very manual intensive processes which take a lot of time. The procurement process from a human advisor originating a lead to a completed sale or a policy being on the books can easily exceed 3 months in scope. And along the way, there's many paper forms, many manual processes which are ripe for disruption. So our strategy really over the last 10 years, and particularly over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, has been focusing on removing friction in that process, automating and simplifying as many of those processes using technological solutions as possible to just minimize the attrition rate for all those endless death by 1,000 cuts that a client experiences in the journey. And I'll just share at a very high level a couple of examples of the solutions we've put in place over the last few years, if we can pass on there. So the first one is we actually, interestingly, sort of act like an InsurTech company in that we have a proprietary piece of software we have developed known as Events, which sits in the advice stage of the journey as a effectively one-shop technical solution for a 6-step advice process. That platform itself is not robo-advice today, but it does all those things I mentioned in terms of significantly reducing friction, using smart customer experience and UX design, smart data models. We're not talking necessarily as deep as what MJ was just talking about, but certainly mesh block level data and smart defaults based on regions, demographics, family composition, etc., to greatly shorten that process. And a couple of the highlights there is we use the system extensively with our small internal distribution team. We found that by implementing that system deep into that human advice process, we estimate the time save for that process in terms of human hours to sale to be less than half of what it would be without using that system or what it was before implementing that system. And the one that gets our bean counters going is we've noted a 26% increase in average annualized premium income submitted from cases off the back of the Events platform versus cases we had prior to the Events system being available to our internal team. Secondly, to continue the theme of lowering attrition rates or removing friction, we developed the My Underwriting Manager platform on top of our core kind of application stack, which is to replace the traditionally paper and manual underwriting process in life insurance, which is quite extensive. And that uses some pretty smart workflows, behavioral analytics, and reflexive question sets to just bring that time down by about 60% in terms of completing an application versus a human application. And additionally, about a third of all cases are assessed by the system's rule engines straight away. So you have a offer of terms at the point of sale as opposed to an underwriting workflow queue, which can often be a week plus in a manual kind of environment. More recently, we started licensing kind of dedicated fintech and insurtech platforms for linear purposes. So an example of that is we've procured the Fineos platform as a future claims management system, the first implementation of which is due in the next month or two, and will continue to be implemented over the next coming years. It's a big project. And the Centro platform in our group administration space, we recognize that as far as your core policy administration stack, that does one thing really well, which is administering life insurance policies, and everything else you kind of need some more purpose-built solutions for. But a real focus for us in recent times in terms of digital has been I guess, enabling future innovation by taking a backwards look at our core technological or underlying technology around things like DevOps and unified environments and API managers, and just making sure that you have a good architectural view to enable additions of new technology or additions of new development on top of what you already have without creating legacy issues moving forward. And that's about me from a high level overview.
I have noticed a huge shift though in recent years, and mainly towards that kind of digital onboarding. I think we in Tower are now writing, and particularly my business in Tower Direct, we're writing 55% plus of our new business online. So from a digital perspective, we're also, we went live with our customer portal, My Tower, about 2 years ago now, in fact, nearly this time last year, 2 years ago. And we've now got 50% of my customers up online as well. So, over 100,000. So we're really seeing an appetite to use digital tools. I think, people are certainly expecting much more transparency, much more convenience in the way that they work with their insurer. I was on a webinar yesterday, and they mentioned the recent McKinsey article on personalisation that said 70% of people expect personalised interactions and more than that, get frustrated when they don't happen. And I think, as an insurance industry, we've conditioned customers to think personalised experiences equals a broker. And I think, in certainly the last couple of years, perhaps 2 to 3 years, I think that has fundamentally changed in the New Zealand landscape. And so I think digital and data is all at the heart of changing that.
So obviously we track metrics for our own platforms to see usage and what the efficiency ratios those are getting, both in terms of customer fall-offs versus customer conversions, etc. I think realistically, a lot of the metrics that are worth looking at from a life insurance point of view don't exist in any one particular company. So they're things like search analytics, and they're things like page views on, various resources around the web, whether it be sorted, whether it be FSC pages, whether it be our own web pages or elsewise, whether it be things like social media requests for contact directly to us. So I mean, our analytics, again, in life insurance, as I mentioned before, are quite far behind where they will be in general, just because our industry has been slower to adapt to digital-led engagements. But all of the hallmarks are there of clients seeking more digital-first engagement. Now, that doesn't mean that a client seeking digital-first engagement is necessarily going to want a digital-only process, but certainly, I think we are moving as an industry more towards a hybrid enabled model where there will be partial digital engagement and human engagement available, as opposed to being a true digital transformation from all human to all digital all the time.
I think two things. One is and Chris actually mentioned this before around, try to find the pain point, look for the friction. Really truly understand what wicked customer problem is your solution solving, so that you can be really super clear around that. I think, look to other industries, because there's a real silver lining, I think, when you're late to the party. You get to see what didn't work, and you get to see the evolution of what did. And so I think InsurTechs in the insurance space can leapfrog some of the pain that others went through in different sectors. So I think there's a real opportunity to look at both the kind of the friction and what others are doing in in other industries, because those same experiences are here in insurance. I think the second thing, and it's based on the experience we had. I spent a bit of time at Plug and Play as well a few years ago. And one of the things I really personally struggled with was in New Zealand, and Australia to a degree, but in New Zealand, we simply don't have the scale for the very micro or niche solutions that a lot of InsurTechs on the global scale space are looking at, right? And it's super hard as an insurer to have to stitch together multiple solutions from multiple vendors to try to come up with one experience. So think end to end. End to end within a journey or end to end within an experience. It doesn't have to be, we're not asking for another platform. We've got one. But what can your solution solve in its own entirety? And I think that's probably one of the things I wished we had more people looking at that. So don't look at trying to solve everything, and don't try to solve a so niche that we simply don't have the volume to support that.
I've met with many InsurTechs and FinTechs over the years, and even when the solution is good and the scope is good, there's always a consideration for insurers around integration hell, and particularly in life insurance, the data sovereignty is really important. Our policy administration system is king, and that's going to limit whatever we can do in terms of piling systems on top or integrations, and what can live outside of that flow versus what needs to be in a new flow or new system. I guess coming into it with a respective understanding of what technology is likely to be in play is handy, because it saves you spending a lot of time getting excited and then finding that the solution is just not even possible.
How do you help solve the transparency issue? Because I think so many customers and insurance customers, just the complexity of insurance relative to their understanding is still a bit of I think it's still a barrier for people to really positively engage in us as a product, whether it's life, health, GI, doesn't matter. So I still think that there's opportunity in that space.
The complexity in understanding policy wordings for a prospective client or an existing client, there's only so much you can do on paper, whereas we know that technology enables much deeper, I guess, engagements and a much more personalized way of experiencing content or information. And that's not really probably going to be solved by any given insurer, just because of the amount of thought and capital that would go into solving something that you would argue hasn't necessarily prevented sales or hasn't necessarily detrimented customer experience historically enough that would be a problem that hits the top of your priority list. But I think the advantage to a lot of those kind of issues that are issues, but maybe aren't issues that will burn the house down for, is that if you come to an insurer with a solution for a problem that is a real problem, that I would go, yes, I can see that's a problem, but it's not a problem I could put number one on my priority list. It's far easier to consider a solution from someone else than building a solution from scratch or trying to procure a solution from scratch. So I think there's opportunity in areas like that, that maybe there wouldn't be if you were the technology company in Partners Life or in Tower, for example.